Today I'm going to show you how to create a spooky Victorian house work of art. So my students are doing this work of art because we're learning about architecture. We're focusing on including detail to create a specific mood or feeling. They're reviewing their importance of the contour line, especially in a silhouette, and including those exterior details to really help define what's going on in the house when you don't have any interior details. And finally, they're focusing on using color to emphasize a mood. We do these in the fall because they really fit with Halloween, but you could really make a work of art like this any time of the year. So this is what I'm going to show you guys today. Let's get started.
Okay, to start drawing your house, you're going to need a large piece of paper. My students are using 18 by 24 inch sheets. The bigger the paper, the more space you have to incorporate your details. You'll need a pencil. I strongly suggest using a ruler to get your straight lines. That's all you're going to need for the drawing part of your Victorian house project. So to start, you want to kind of figure out where your house's foundation is going to be. That's like the bottom of the house. You don't want to draw your house at the bottom of the paper. That's a really like elementary kindergarten way to draw. You always want to have some ground leading up to your house. It'll give it some depth and some perspective. But you also don't want to start your house up here, because remember, this is going to be a silhouette, so that would make all of this area just empty black space, which also wouldn't look very good. So I usually kind of start the house first. You need to decide composition-wise, do you want it centered or do you want it asymmetrical? And I usually find that these look most interesting when they're asymmetrical. So I'm going to locate my house kind of in this area and have some ground leading up to it. So I usually just start with the base of my house. And you don't want your house falling off the paper in either direction either. So even though it's going to kind of be more over here, that way there will be some room over here for like a tree and a moon maybe. I'm not going to have my house all the way up against this side because then it looks kind of smashed into your paper. So there's the base of my house, and I'm going to go ahead and just create my house kind of in boxes. So that's kind of like the bones of the house, like if you were building this house from the studs. So as you make this, remember each floor should be about the same size because houses are made for humans to live in, and a human is the same height no matter what floor they're on. Your houses should also, each floor should be wider than it is tall. Your house in general is going to be tall because we're going to do like 3 or 4 stories, but each floor should be, you know, a shorter rectangle. So if you want to use your ruler to actually measure out a height for each floor, you can, like maybe I'll do 4 inches high for each floor. But you don't have to. If you just kind of try to make them all about the same, it'll look fine. Of course, if you want to get really precise, you can use a protractor to make sure these are right angles, but since we're going to be tracing with oil pastel, if we're off just a little, that doesn't really matter. So there's my first floor. I'm going to go ahead and create the ground coming off of that floor. In drawing that has depth and perspective, a lot of the time your ground goes beyond, like out past what you're drawing. But since this is a silhouette, if our ground went up high, it would be black and the house would be black and you wouldn't really be able to see the first floors of the house. So we want this to kind of look like you're looking up towards the house, which means the ground would come out and go down. And you can decide how much of a hill this house is really built on. That also just gives you a little bit of a ground if you want to incorporate windows for like a cellar or a basement. So each floor now you're going to build kind of like a block, and they should be about the same height. And the other idea is that as these are built, the floors either stay the same width or get smaller as they go up. You wouldn't have a floor hanging out past the previous floor unless you had like a balcony with a pillar holding it up or something like that, which you totally can incorporate. You can have some of that negative space if you want to, but I'm going to just start with my basic building blocks of my house. So I'm going to go ahead and do a second floor slightly smaller than my first floor. And you're just going to continue up. You can do 3 floors, you can do 2 floors with some like cornices or something like that. You can kind of decide. Okay, so there's kind of the basic building blocks for my house. I have kind of 1, 2, 3 floors, and then this like tower that kind of juts up above. So now I'm going to incorporate some more of my details into this house to make it look like a house and also give it that more Victorian look. So the first thing that I suggest doing is laying out all your windows. Now, as you do that, you need to think about where a window goes on a house. You don't have windows along the bottom half or along the top half. They run right along the middle, because in theory, if you had a person living in here, they'd be about this tall, you know, and so there'd be some space above their head. Their window would run kind of between their torso and their head. So you'd have windows in this general area, all right? You also want to think about on which floor, what shapes your windows are. Now, most Victorian houses, most of their windows are tall and skinny anyway, but you might have a different shaped window on a second floor where there is a bedroom versus on a first floor where there's like a living room or something like that. And again, you should probably be using your ruler to create your windows. Another thing that's really important to remember is that this door that you add would be made of wood, which would mean that you wouldn't be able to see through the door. The door would be solid. So to show where a door is, it's going to be really important that you incorporate windows around that door. So you need to figure out where the entrance to this house might be. And then if you need to map out lightly where that door is, you can, but remember the door is going to be black and the space around it's going to be black. The only thing you're going to see are any windows that are located around that door. So you're wanting to think of realistic proportion. How big would a window be in comparison to how big that floor would be, or how big a person would be living in this space? That's something really important to keep in mind as you're drawing. As you're planning this out, if you want to plan out where some mansard roofs are that might include dormer windows in them, you can go ahead and do that. So in this space, you might have the dormer window. So I'm going to draw the shape of the dormer that would go over that window. Even though when we color this in, all of this space, this will all just be one black space. That little shape alludes to the fact that there's a roof there over this window. So on these turrets, on these tall towers, you can decide, is this consisting of 2 floors, or is this a space with a staircase that might have one tall window in it? And again, that's personal preference based on your design. So notice how from my first floor all the way up to this 4th floor, windows are still relatively the same height. You've got some variety, some different kinds of windows, and that's okay. So some areas, like especially a window that's in a roof, might be smaller than a normal window for somebody to view out of. But it looks like somebody could live on this floor and be this tall, and also live on this floor and be the same height. And that's what you're after with that accurate proportion. So once you've got your floors mapped out and your windows mapped out, now it's time for that detail in the exterior line, that contour line that goes around your house. So you don't want to have just sharp right angles. You really want everything to have more detail than that. This is another great opportunity to even incorporate some windows down below the foundation. That might imply that there's some kind of basement underneath, which is always a cool and eerie effect on this style of architecture. So those basement windows wouldn't sink down all the way. They would just be at the very top for you to peek out of. So just continue to add as much detail in the exterior, in the outline, that contour line that goes around as you can think of. We're not adding detail onto the walls or the sides of the house because you can't see that. All of that space will be blacked out, and that's really important to understand. All right, and that's how you do your drawing of your Victorian house architecture project. This is an appropriate time to draw any other details you might want in the background, whether you're incorporating a moon or a tree branch. Some students leave more space on the ground to add other details, lamp posts, gravestones. If you're going to incorporate any cracks or cobwebs in the windows or any other silhouettes that you might have, now is the time to draw out those kind of details as well. So you want to do everything with your pencil before you go back and start doing things with oil pastel. Okay, so now that you have your drawing done, we're going to go ahead and add our color to the house, your moon, and any other details or silhouettes that you're going to have in your picture. So the first thing you're going to want to do is do Sharpie in any areas that you're going to be coloring over with an oil pastel later. So the bulk of the house is going to be black oil pastel, but the windows, since they're going to be producing light and you want to be able to see those details in the windows, are going to be yellow. So we're going to color over the top of them with yellow. But to get those black lines, we don't want to go back and try to do the black lines on top because they look really thick and bulky. So the trick is to do them underneath with a Sharpie and then do your yellow over. So you're just going to get a Sharpie, and the only part you really need to trace are the things that are going to be underneath a colored oil pastel. So generally that's just any details you have in the windows. This is also a great time if you have any other cool details or ideas you want to add in the windows. Some of my students like to do like a silhouette of a person looking out, spider webs, cracks, stuff like that to just add to kind of the meaning or the feel of your picture. Now is when you would draw those in your windows. So if you wanted to use like a fine point Sharpie to possibly do some like spider web designs, this is the time to do it. Anything that you missed tracing in the window, any stray pencil lines, will show underneath your yellow oil pastel. So go ahead and get any of those erased right now as well. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do any of our light colors of oil pastels. So you would be using either like a yellow or a white for anything that produces light in your image. So in this image, the two things that would be lit up are the windows in the house and the moon. You want to do this before you do the black. If you do the black first and then go back and try to do like your yellow will get streaks of black. Some people like that. It gives it a more kind of old grungy look. But if you know you definitely don't want that, I strongly suggest starting with these colors first. So you're just going to work through, start with a nice crisp edge. So go around that outline and then color in. So don't start by scribbling in the middle. Go around your edge and define where the sides of that window are, then color in. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and do the moon. Some people choose to do the moon with color other than white. I've had students do blood moons in red or yellow moons, or even just have streaks of blues and purples in their moons. It's totally up to you. Now, when you do like a white on your white paper, you can't necessarily see it that well right now, but when you go back and do the paint up to it, you are able to see if it's streaky or not. So this is a step where it's really important to get that defined outline going around, and where it's extremely important to make sure to color thoroughly. So you don't want to rush through this step. If you look close, you can see the difference between the white oil pastel and the white paper. They have slightly different tones to them, but you have to make sure that you don't leave it looking streaky. Otherwise, it'll be clear that this is something colored, and it won't look as realistic or as hauntingly interesting. Another important thing to keep in mind as you're working is you're going to start getting oil pastel on your hands. The background that we do, the sky, is going to be colored with watercolor, and the whole reason we do that is because the watercolor will be able to go right up to the oil pastel without penetrating it. But what that also means is that if you take that oil pastel on your hands and get it on the background, you're going to have fingerprints in your background that you can't hide. So it's very important to not let your oil pastel get streaky. Resist trying to brush it off. If you need to loosen up those little bits and then tap off your paper, that's okay. But you don't want any smears of oil pastel. Now we're ready for the black silhouettes. So that's pretty much anything left that's not colored in. Anything that isn't producing light is going to be colored in black, because the idea is that everything here is a silhouette and it's being backlit by the light being reflected from the moon. And then you can also see the details from the lights lit up in the house. Everything else, though, will be black. So you're going to start with your outlines. If you have a nice sharp new oil pastel, it's probably an opportune time to do any thinner lines first that you want to be really defined. Be careful as you're moving around that you're not dragging your hand through oil pastel and smearing it onto your background. So if you need to turn your paper as you go to avoid that, please do so. Having a crisp outline to your house is important to bring out those exterior details that really define your different floors. So that would be the next step, is doing your exterior outline nice and crisp, and then also outlining each of your windows with black. And again, work with your hand closest to the edge of your paper so you're not resting it and dragging it through oil pastel. Giving that defining edge to your windows with the black is also very important. So rather than just coloring in your space, make sure to go around and outline each of your windows so you have that crisp black outline going around it. Once you have all your black outlines completed on everything, now you go back in and color in that remaining space inside your house, your ground, and any other details that are silhouetted. There's no need to trace any interior details because it's going to be the same color on both sides. But if you did trace details like the division of the floors, it's not going to make any difference at this point. So now you color everything in as neatly as you can, staying inside the lines. As you color, resist the urge to brush off all of your loose oil pastels, because that will create streaks through your sky. It's best to take your paper, tilt it up so that they fall down through the house, and tap them off on the table. It also makes cleaning up later a lot easier. continue coloring, avoiding streaking through your sky as much as you can until everything that isn't your background sky is colored in black to appear as a silhouette. Now that we're done doing all of the oil pastel, all we have left to fill in is the negative space. That's basically just your sky. And so we're going to be doing that with paint. You can use watercolor, works just fine. You can also use like temper cakes, or basically something that you dilute with water, because the idea is that you paint in the sky and you paint right up to the oil pastel, but the oil pastel and the water paint won't mix, so the oil pastel will show through. So I'm going to be using temper cakes just because I like having the option of mixing them, but watercolor works just as good for this. So what you want is you want to kind of think of a color palette that would look good in the night sky. This is going to be kind of an abstract interpretation of your night sky. So a lot of people do shades of blue. You can give it a more whimsical look by incorporating like purples or a spookier kind of dark night look with shades of black. I've even had students who have done blues and purples and reds before, or even some kind of like sunset gradation. But the idea is that you're going to have vertical streaks of your different colors in the night sky just blending together using watercolor techniques. So that's what we're going to do. So basically what I'm doing is I'm starting with one of my colors and I'm giving it a streaked look in different random places, and I'm going to go back and fill in more and more space, but you really just want to build your colors around randomly. That will give it a more organic look. And you can see that as I'm doing my streaks, I can paint right up to and on top of the oil pastel, and the oil pastel shows through. The moon's a little bit trickier. It still works essentially like that. You can leave the streaks on there. However, if you just wet your brush, they'll come off of the moon just like that pretty easily. Or you can kind of use a paper towel or a tissue and just kind of splotch those a little bit so you can see that the oil pastel and the water don't tend to mix, but it does sit on top of your white just a little bit more clearly than it does on top of the black. With watercolor, you could pretty much paint right onto the white and it wouldn't show up at all. But the temper cakes are just a little bit more bold. However, you're getting the exact thing you want with the black, which is the black shows right through your streaky, watery lines, which is why we used oil pastels on this. So if your paint's covering your black a little too much, just water it down a little bit more. But anyway, you want these to be random widths, thicknesses, in different spots. And then once you've really kind of spread out one of your main colors, you can go back with your next color and fill in some more space. I'm trying not to do too thick of black because I don't want it to camouflage with the black silhouette. However, the nice thing about temper cakes is that you can create other shades in your empty palette. So I do want my night sky to have a darker feel to it. So I am going to go ahead and mix up some of my black and some of my white in one of these empty spaces to create a nice gray to mix across the sky. And that way my gray won't mix with my black and look exactly the same. So my silhouette will still stand out, but I'll have a nice dark, eerie night sky. As I'm adding my colors to the night sky, when I have one color that I want to go up against another color, I like the look of them blending together a little bit more. So sometimes I'll go back with just a little bit of water and let them blend together where they meet and create their own new versions of colors. You don't have to do that. You can leave it more diced streakiness, but I don't like the look of those harsh streaks. I like when they blend together, and so that's one of the beauties of using a water-based paint like watercolor or temper cakes, is as you're adding more layers, you can blend your previous layers with your new layers to give it a really smooth effect. So you can see I'm really trying to avoid having any one area just densely filled with a lot of one color. I'm really trying to hop around with each of my colors, giving them opportunities to blend with the colors that are already on there. And as I work, that's how I kind of decide if I'm gonna wanna add more colors or more shades of the colors I'm working with, or just stick to what I've got. I could definitely continue with the different blues and grays around. I could even mix in some darker and lighter blues, but I think I might incorporate just a few purples as well. Of course, you do not have to use my color palette. You can come up with whatever eerie, whimsical, or beautiful color palette you choose to fit the theme of your house. So you can see the beauty of using this water-based paint is I can go right up to the house, and then even little areas of negative space I can continue across, so it just looks like that color's flowing behind this silhouette. What you don't want to do is I have a lot of students who just paint like up to the house, and you have this little barrier right there that they don't quite get their paint into, and you get this white edge. You don't want to do that. The whole reason we're using a water-based paint is so you can paint right onto that dark oil pastel, and the oil pastel and the watery paint won't mix together. That's why we're doing this and not like a tempera paint or a more dense paint. So paint right up to your black. I don't think I'm going to add any more colors to my color palette. I love the way this color palette looks. However, I am going to mix some different shades. So I think I'm going to do a dark purple here, just to give me a little bit more flexibility and variety in the background without changing the mood that this color palette's kind of created. I think I might also make a blue violet, just to give me a little bit more color choices, even though I'm still staying really within this specific limited cool color palette. One final finishing touch I like to do, just to give the moon kind of an eerie feel, is take those colors, even though I've kind of scrubbed them off of it, but pull them in from the sides and go across it, and it gives it that streaky look. And I think that, you know, just those streaks of those colors that you already see in the night sky kind of give it the look of like clouds moving across it. You can even dab it a little bit, but don't be afraid to get that moon a little dirty, as long as you can still see it. And then just make sure you've got, you know, all your spaces filled. And I have kids who a lot of time miss like little spaces down by the sides of the house, or little negative areas, you know, little cutouts. So there really shouldn't be any white left other than your white from your moon, or any white you've deliberately put into your image. And that's pretty much it.
All right, that's it. I really hope that you enjoyed making a spooky Victorian home with me today. I think that they come out pretty great. So please stick around on my channel to see some more awesome works of art. Thanks for watching.